Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are joined by Carly Heath. Her pronouns are she and they, and she has earned her BA from San Francisco State University and her MFA from Chapman University. Originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, Carly teaches design, art, theater, and writing for various colleges and universities. Her debut novel, The Reckless Kind, which came out on November 9th, has garnered enthusiastic reviews for its nuanced depiction of queer and disabled identities. So Carly Heath, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. It's great to have you.
I am super excited to have you because this is the first kind of young adult book I've read in a long time. Tell us about you and how you decided to write this type of story.
Oh, great question. I really began kind of stewing in the ideas for this book a few years ago when I was going through a lot of horse-related injuries. I had adopted a horse that was very feral and she had a really difficult background. And so I was getting injured over and over again. It could be a string of really bad luck. And so I kind of got this idea for this family, the Fuglsads, the main family of the center of the Reckless Kind, where they would always take in the animals that no one else wanted. And because of that, they would get injured all the time. And they kind of developed this myth about themselves that they're cursed with perpetual bad luck. And every time something bad happens, it will happen 3 times for them. And so the genesis of the idea came from that, but then I thought, who would be the most interesting people to tell this story? And I thought, viewing the family from 2 outsiders who also felt like outsiders in their village and who kind of idolized the Fuglsads would be really, really interesting. And I love the idea of a dual narrative where it's a male and female character who are not necessarily going to fall in love, but fall into friendship. And so the main characters are Asta, who is she's queer, but she doesn't have the language to describe who she is. She's also hard of hearing. She has an atypical appearance because she has Waardenburg syndrome. And so being in a society that is a patriarchal society and focuses on, women as objects of what their appearance is, and women as receptive vehicles for men's desires, and Asta not conforming to that and being told she should be grateful that a young man wants to marry her, and resisting that, and also going through the process of deprogramming from the patriarchy. I thought that would be really interesting. And she deeply loves Gunnar, who is also the boyfriend of Erland, the secret boyfriend, because this is Beans, by the way. And so the other point of view in the story is Erland, who is gay in early 1900s during, a period where he also kind of doesn't have the full language for his identity. And he deeply loves Gunnar, who's Asta's best friend. And so you get Gunnar from the point of view of these 2 characters who deeply love him, who deeply care about him, and they each see really different sides to who he is as a person. And they all end up going away to live together in this mountain cabin above town after leaving their families. And they face many struggles because they are very different in a society that really stresses conformity. And their support and their kind of uncomplicated love of each other is what gets them through everything. So it's a found family story. It's a story about identity. All the characters have disabilities in some way. And so it's a story that kind of explores disability, not as something that is the main focal point of the story, but just as something that's part of life, which I don't think gets talked about enough in the real world.
Right. And it's not their defining characteristic. There's so much more to each of those characters than their disability.
Yeah, they're all very complicated characters, and yeah, there's definitely a lot to them. They're definitely big heart-filled characters with a lot of heart and a lot of care and tenderness and values, but they definitely aren't defined by their disability.
Yeah, you definitely could feel the love come through in your book. One of the things I wanted to explore with you is why you felt like all these different levels of representation were so important.
I look at like my friends and the people who are in my life, and I personally can't even really think of any friends I have who are not disabled in some way. And all my friends are somewhere on the like gender and queer spectrum. And when I look at a lot of popular media, I don't see a representation of the diversity of reality in many cases. And I really would like to see more of the fact that so many people in our society are disabled. And I think, and also who don't conform to like the heteronormative patriarchal idea of like male and female and the binary identity. So I would really love there to be in the more representation for diverse identities. And also I think there's a reason that sometimes these different identities have been erased from fiction and media. It's because if we acknowledge that everyone has different levels of ability, then we have to create a society that accommodates everyone and is building up on the diverse strengths that everyone has. But as we are now, we're kind of in a society where it's all about who can be the most productive for an employer, for a capitalist system.
Capitalism.
Exactly.
It always comes back to capitalism.
Exactly. And imagine how much more wonderful it would be if instead of building a society for capitalism, we build a society for people, and we created a society that's like, how can we create the most resources for everyone to benefit? And what if we lived in a way that we constantly thought about, what can I do to make the other person's life better? That person, has this need, this specific need, like everyone has a certain need. How can we build a society that benefits that person and their needs?
That would be a lovely way to live.
Yep.
If we could all live that way. One of the things that you bring up is them finding their people and finding their ways of living their lives and describing themselves. And so much of what you're talking about and things that you address in the book, I think are relevant to current times. And there are people going through similar realities. So, but the book itself is set in 1904 as opposed to current day. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to do that as opposed to making it a contemporary story?
That's a great question. It seems like every time I get asked this question, I come up with a slightly different answer. And I think I really wish I was someone who is very conscious of why I do things. And many times I'm kind of realizing as I write, a lot of things happen kind of unconsciously and are based in random things that I'm interested in at the moment. One thing that I was kind of reading right before I wrote what would become The Reckless Kind was Kristin Lavransdatter, which is the book by Sigrid Undset that was published in the 1920s. And Kristin Lavransdatter is a book set in medieval Norway, and it's very vivid, intense, emotional book. The setting is very fully described, this medieval Norway. It's kind of awesome. The message and moral of the book is not something I'm a fan of, which is essentially, if you defy your parents, you'll suffer. Yeah. And my book is the exact opposite of that. My book is like, sometimes your parents do not have your best interest in mind. And it's important to find the people who do have your best interest in mind and who do support you and love you and join with them. And sometimes it means standing up to authority and doing the opposite of what authority wants you to do. The vibe of Kristin Lavransdatter I really loved. And so I was kind of like picturing scenes that were kind of in this world. I was also reading a lot of, because I was just really fascinated by Scandinavia and Norway. And I was reading a lot of travel journals that were written in like the 19th century, that were English people going to Norway and like describing it. So I love that. I also, in college, I'd done a costume design project of Much Ado About Nothing. I set it in the early 1900s. So I was already kind of familiar with that setting and that the clothes and the vibe. And I'm a big aesthetic person, like the aesthetic of like a village in the turn of the century in Scandinavia was just really, really appealing to me. And it's interesting how kind of, as I was exploring all this sort of pastoral thing, the cottagecore like aesthetic has become really popular around the same time as my book is coming out. And I'm like, oh, maybe I was tapping into like the collective unconscious of like, we want to get into like the pastoral, like cottagecore thing. We want to move maybe into a more simple way of life. I don't know. So it's really like things I thought were pretty, and like that's kind of what I was going with at the time.
I think that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
What a great way to describe it.
I really am finding it difficult often to describe my creative process. But I think with many artists and writers, it's like this random thing is interesting to me, and I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole for a little while and see where it leads me as I create this thing.
Well, it's interesting that you say it's difficult to describe your creative process, because I'm going to ask you to kind of describe your creative process more in how it happened for you. Did you get the idea for the book and then you started to write, and how long did that take? Or were you already writing and you kind of stumbled into the book?
I went to college to be a filmmaker. And I was originally interested in filmmaking, and I kind of realized that that's not my jam. I really like just imagining things and having the complete creative control that like writing a novel gives you. I had this idea for scenes just starting to simmer in my unconscious. And I did drawings that were kind of inspired by the characters. And this was way back in like 2013, even 2012. Yeah, okay. It was started a long time ago. Just little scenes started appearing in my head. And I wrote down like a page back in, I found my first like draft was 2013, and I had emailed it to myself. And it was actually the first page that I wrote was a scene that would later happen like around page 150 in the book. It was the scene where Fred and Gunnar have their accident. So I kind of wrote that first. And then I was like, no, I'm actually going to sit down and write this whole book, I think, because it kind of came to me. And so I sat down and wrote the whole thing, but it was actually like an omniscient point of view. It was like there were 2 chapters that were Asta and Erland's point of view. And then I was like, okay, so I got the whole story. Then I went back and I rewrote the story from Asta and Erland's point of view instead of an omniscient point of view. And then you go through this whole, when you're trying to get published, this whole thing of querying agents and sending your little query letter, which is like your summary of the book, and then like your first 10 pages often to agents. And I only sent out like 5 queries at first, and I got a full request from an agent who wanted to read the whole manuscript. I still wasn't sure that it was good yet. So I waited till they got back to me with feedback, and they said, really like this. This is a close call, but here's some things that weren't working for us. And so I revised based on that feedback and sent out some more queries. And kind of each time I would get like a full request, I would not send out anything else. This is probably not the best way to do things, but I'd wait till I got feedback. And I also started to get feedback and started to become more of a member of the writing community. And I started to get feedback from other writers. There's this thing called pitch wars, and I was interested in participating in pitch wars. So I connected with other pitch wars hopefuls. We swapped manuscripts and we read each other's work and we gave feedback on each other's work.
Wow.
Got rejected from Pitch Wars, got rejected from Author Mentor Match, which is another writing competition. But I got a lot of feedback along the way. And then I ended up getting my first agent. Went on sub, which is when the agent sends your work out to publishers for a year. Didn't get my book sold, got signed with another agent after I left that first agent. And that book went out on sub, that version of the book, I should say, went out on sub for a year. And then finally, after a year, it got picked up by my publisher. And then, yeah, so it was from, the first draft being written in like 2013 to finally getting a book deal was 2019. And then it was 2 years from 2019 to 2021 of edits and all that, the editorial process that goes on with a publisher until the book finally came out in 2021. So that ended up being, I'm bad at math. It ended up being 8 years from like writing the first draft to actually getting it published.
Wow. And that process when your book was out there, how did that feel in your body? Was it like anxiety? Was it happiness? Was it a mix? How did you feel?
Like when it first went out into the world, a big thing was just exhaustion, because I just am thinking around that month, I was learning about, okay, how do I get on podcasts? How do I, then they also send you like people send you interviews that you write up and do all that and your launch. So there's a lot of like busy work that happens around the time that your book comes out and scheduling things. And so I honestly was really focused on that. And I didn't really experience my book is out in the world thing. It kind of like is a delayed reaction. But I think it hits me sometimes when I will just come across a review that someone posts on social media and I'll be like, oh, wow, that person liked my book and it's real. It's like real. This person's actually reading, a stranger I don't know is reading my book and liking it. That's amazing. That sort of thing is a trip.
So how similar or different is the finished product from what you initially intended?
Completely different from the first draft.
Okay.
I would say as it goes through the revision process, it becomes more of what I intended. It becomes more me than like the first draft is me, is kind of like a sculpture where you're like, there's a block here. It's kind of this shaped. And then as you go through and you do revisions and you get people like asking questions like, why does this character do this? Or this part is boring, or, this part doesn't make any sense. You chip away at it and you rethink it and you revise it and it becomes more the thing that you wanted, which is weird because other people are giving their feedback, but their feedback is making it the way that you want it, if that makes sense. It's a weird thing that happens.
Yeah,
it does make sense. Yeah.
It's like you're getting a chance to explain yourself better.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So when I was reading it with my 15-year-old around, we talked about a lot of the concepts, and one that came up quite often that we even discussed with my 22-year-old was this idea of a queer platonic triad. And it was interesting because my older daughter, she's a romantic, so she kept trying to romanticize the relationship. Why? I love that you did it, but why did you decide to make part of it so platonic?
Yeah, I can't think I've been struggling with trying to figure out what I would want in life. And I tried to for so long to conform to the hetero patriarchal idea of how you should live your life with one man and one woman. And I've known for a long time the having babies thing, not my thing. And I've kind of, through actually writing this book, kind of realized that getting married thing is not my thing either. Bless people who want to do that. That's not my thing. But really, while writing this book, I kind of discovered what I would want in life is the idea of a queer platonic relationship where it's being with people who you deeply love, who you're deeply committed to, but you're not romantically involved or sexually involved at all. It's the friendship, and that's basically what I would love in life. And so I'm like, I want to put that representation in a book, and so I'm kind of like writing like what I would like out of life. And yeah, that's something I struggled with, and it really early on when I was getting feedback from people, they would be like, oh, so Asta's in love with Gunnar. No, she loves him, but she's not romantically in love with him. And so finding ways to like give her language to describe that was something that was difficult.
Yeah, well, that was my first feeling. Like in the beginning, it was like, oh, she loves him. She's in love with him. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, no. She loves him. Like they're her family.
Yeah.
And that was something that came through for me throughout the book, was this whole idea of chosen family.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so it sounds like, that's something that's also very important to you as well. The whole idea of chosen family.
Yes, definitely. Because sometimes the truth is, just because you're blood related to someone doesn't mean you have anything in common with them, or that those people necessarily care about you or care about your well-being. So I think it's really important for teens to be able to see representation of, you know what, because you hear, gosh, there's so much in our society of, well, they're your family. Yeah, they're abusive. Yeah, they make you feel like shit all the time. Yeah, the idea of calling them on the phone and talking to them makes you want to like run screaming into the woods forever, but they're your family. And so I would love teens to be able to have the representation of, you know what? Yeah, sometimes your family does not have your best interest in mind, and it's totally okay to separate from them and find the people who do care about you and who are going to treat you the right way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I like that.
I think you said difficult, but I want to express to you, I think that was such an important piece of your work, and I appreciate you for putting it out there, because I see a lot of this questioning of one's gender in our younger people, and not just their gender, but maybe their sexual orientation and things that, like you said, they don't have the language for. They are talking about it more than we talked about it when we were, well, you're not quite our age, but our age. And I just think the book is amazing because someone can read it and say, oh, I feel kind of like that. So that's okay. It allows it to be okay. And you've made that space for people. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I also like the idea of retconning history a little bit too. Like I've done a lot of research, and even though, we tend to think of, oh, the past was very gender binary and the past was very patriarchal. There's a lot of research that no, there's queer people thriving and different family dynamics thriving back in the day. And I found this dude, Edward Carpenter, who was born in 1844, and he was an early gay rights, animal rights activist. And he wrote these pamphlets. One pamphlet was called Homogenic Love. It's a place in a free society, and it's all about same-sex relationships and why they are so important. And not just why they are, and this was written in like the 1890s. And so not just that they exist, but that they are important and that they're good. And also he wrote this pamphlet called Some Transitional Types of People, which is all about basically trans identities and like non-binary identities. And like, hey, there's people who don't conform to the male or the female gender dynamics, and that's awesome. And everything that he says is like, this is positive, this is good, we should be supporting that. And there's a lot of 19th century literature about female husbands, basically people who are born assigned female at birth, who wore men's clothes, who lived as men, who married women. And then later on, they found out, oh, wow, this person was assigned female at birth. So, and there's like a lot of info about that. So yeah, queer people were thriving in their own way back in the day, in and certainly well before colonial times, well before, Western European culture came over and like homogenized anything. There's a lot of indigenous cultures around the world who celebrated diverse gender and sexual identities.
Right. I think that's called the term two-spirit.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the West, in North America, there's the two spirits, but like every continent, there's a great, if you go, PBS has a map of gender diverse cultures. And if you do a little Google search for PBS map of gender diverse cultures, it has a map and it has like all of these different indigenous cultures and like descriptions of the different gender identities that those cultures like basically acknowledged. But, they were in many cases wiped out by the spread of Christian monotheism and white settler colonialism, which is, a problem.
Tragic. Yes, very problematic. Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing that you brought up a few sentences ago was animal rights. And I noticed that there was an emphasis on vegetarianism in the book as well, which I've been a vegetarian for a long time. So I totally appreciate that. Yeah. Why the focus there for you?
Well, so I've been vegan for over 20 years, and I'm an animal rights activist, and I also rescue animals. I have a bunch of rescued farm animals, and so I was very interested as I was doing my historical research, researching vegetarianism in Europe. And the vegetarian movement in Europe actually has its 175th anniversary this year. Wow. It started in the 1840s, and it was in Europe in the 19th century. There's this whole vegetarian movement. There was also a movement of like Europeans going to India and learning about like the Indian way of life, and vegetarianism kind of came out from that. But also there was a lot of Europeans who, because they lived on farms with animals, grew up living with their animals, and many people just like loved their animals and like had a bond and special connection with them, and decided, I'm not going to eat this creature who I adore, and so I'm going to become a vegetarian now that they have this word for it. Prior to the 1840s, this word Pythagoreanism was really common, and that goes back to like BC times in ancient Greece. The Pythagoreans were people who didn't eat animals. And so all through like, the early, days and into the medieval time and into the Enlightenment, Pythagoreanism was vegetarianism basically. But then 1840s got called vegetarianism. So I like this idea of this family. They work heavily with animals. They're farriers. They work on horses' feet. They work on horses' hooves. I am a horse person. I have a horse, so I use my ridiculous language sometimes to talk about my horses.
It's okay. Great. We love animals too. It's fine. But yeah, where was it going? So yeah, this family of farriers, I thought they're going to become vegetarians, especially since they're the outcast heathens who don't follow Christianity and who do their own thing and rescue the animals. They are definitely going to be a part of the vegetarian movement in Europe.
Yeah, I definitely would have tried to figure out how to be part of their family.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I really liked with Asta how she was really just trying to figure out where she fit into all of this. Speaking of somebody who really loved the animals, she loved the little piglet. She loved it so much. Yeah. And she was trying to figure out her way, and she was trying to figure out how to, for lack of a better term, buck the system and exist and find a life for herself without being married.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think her whole storyline was so great. There was so much fire and strength in her that I loved her character so much. Could you talk a little bit more about Asta and how how she came to be and just her whole strength and not being, oh, I have a disability. Oh, woe is me. I mean, there was none of that with her,
Yeah.
which I thoroughly respected.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when I write my characters, like they're all a part of me, like they're a part of who I am. So I feel very much like I feel like Asta, and like people who read it are like, oh, you're Asta. I'm like, yeah, I am. I know. But a lot of what she's struggling with, I think, are things that at least I struggle with, and that women struggle with, is that so much of your life and your existence is other people telling you who you are and who you should be, and you're going through that process of deprogramming from all of the expectations that get placed on women, as far as you want to be a nice person, and you want to be grateful and all of that, but then sometimes people want you to be nice in order to fit their agenda of what they think that you should be. And so I feel like as I was writing her going through the struggle of asserting herself is like, how much do I advocate for myself, and then how much should I maybe not, or maybe have I gone too far, or is it right for me to want this thing? And struggling with selfishness was a word that came up a lot as I was kind of brainstorming and as I was writing, like sometimes worrying about, am I being selfish, and having the guilt of not conforming to what being a good girl and all of that. Yeah, she's a great character. And even in later drafts, I feel like the more and more I wrote and more I revised, I got down to like who she was. And I really like the idea of her not being necessarily receptive in the way that women are supposed to be, in that, women are supposed to be good listeners, and she's hard of hearing. Women are supposed to be like nurturing mother caretakers, and she doesn't want to have children. So I loved all of that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
She did though. She wanted her piglets.
She wants her pig, which I definitely identify with. I want my fur animal babies. I don't necessarily want my human babies, but this little baby.
I think it was either on your book or on Instagram, you said you're eager to talk about all things kidlit, queer representation, disability representation, spirituality, astrology, tarot, and feminism.
Yeah, I'm into all of that. So yeah, I'm really into astrology and tarot and the occult as well. And there's actually, even though The Reckless Kind doesn't have it doesn't have like on the page astrology, it is informed by astrology. Let's just say that.
So?
Wow.
So I'm into ancient Hellenistic astrology, which is like the traditional like Greco-Roman astrology. And there's this timing technique called annual perfections, which divides your life up into to different parts of your chart based on the year of your current life. So when people are 16, they go through what's called a 6th house year. And the 6th house, it deals with your health. It's called the house of bad fortune also. It deals with your health. Sometimes it deals with sickness. Sometimes it deals with also small animals. But it's basically the house of that's Gunnar is going through, because he's 16. So Gunnar is dealing with, 17. Gunnar is dealing with all of the health and the misfortune that comes with being in a 6th house year. And then Erland is 18, and he's going through a 7th house year. And the 7th house is all about partnerships and all about who you are, often romantic marriages, basically. So Erland's whole story is his relationship with Gunnar. Right. And Asta is 19, and she's in an 8th house year. And so she's going through, the 8th house deals with sexuality. It deals with also other people's money and debts. So her whole thing is like, other people's money, the Fulestad's money, like making sure that they're okay. And then her also discovering her own sexuality is her 8th house journey. So, and I also have like planets in mind as I'm kind of like going through their themes and stuff. So it's not on the page, but it's like part of my thought creative process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Do you know it well enough that Raquel and I are both 52? What house are we in?
Let me, I need to pull up my little annual perfections chart.
I'm almost 53 in a few days, but we're still both 52.
Because I'm bad at math in my head. Let me see. Okay.
I'm excited.
I know. It's really fun. I love this stuff. Wait, what are you again? 53?
We're both 52. I'm
52.
3 in a few days.
Yeah.
Okay. So 52 is a 5th house year, which is the house of good fortune. And it's the house that deals with creativity and also children. So likely a lot of things that have been happening for you this year are all dealing with creativity, your children, and you might have had some, depending on the planets that are at work in your chart, you might have had some good luck happening this year.
Yay.
And good.
Well, and creativity.
Yeah.
We started a podcast together. Yep.
When I had my 5th house year in 2021, that was actually when my book came out. So your baby, whether it's like your human child or your creative child, kind of comes out in the world often during a 5th house year.
Yeah.
And then, so going into 53, you'll be in a 6th house year. So health will be an issue. And that is 6th house is the house of bad fortune. So sometimes some unexpected, like unfortunate situations happen. Strangely, it's also the house that deals with pets. So if you have a pet, things around the pet will be very prominent. I know a planet that was kind of activated in my chart this year went into my 6th house, and sadly my dog passed away recently.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he was very old. It was his time, but it was also really hard. So so things like that. But sometimes the 6th house can be really good. It might be like, oh, suddenly I'm getting a new cat or I'm getting a new dog, something like that might happen.
It's fun. That's awesome.
Cool. Nice. I like that.
Do you study for your own personal enjoyment, or is this something you do as a career?
I started just studying because I was fascinated by it. And I don't advertise, but people know that I'm into it. So people come to me and get their chart read and their horoscopes done and stuff when I have time. I'm actually thinking of starting a podcast with my friend called The Astrology of Terrible Things, because my favorite thing, this may sound weird, is like just researching the most messed up, horrible stuff that happens in the world, like amusement park accidents and like bridges collapsing and like volcanoes explode, like random things that just like happen. The San Francisco earthquake, the Donner Party, like that are just like, oh my God, that's so horrible. I'm like fascinated by it. So I always like, whenever I find out about something like that, like an amusement park accident or whatever, I look at the astrology of it and I'm like, oh, it's fascinating. It's all there. It's all there karmically in the chart. And so I would love to do a podcast where kind of like My Favorite Murder, where like I talk about the terrible thing that happened, tell the whole story of it. Then I talk about the astrology of it. And then I'd have my friend find a random terrible thing and talk about it, like without prompting me at all beforehand. And then I, at the moment, look up the chart and we talk about it.
I would totally listen.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll have to keep us posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to kind of start it in April because, oh, by the way, April is going to be a really good astrology time for pretty much everyone. Like it's the first time in so long we actually have like good astrology to look forward to, because
we need it.
Pretty much.
Goodness.
Yeah, pretty much since like 2009, December 2019, the astrology's just been terrible. Like everyone's been having a terrible time. So yeah, April things will finally open up. And April 30th is like the most amazing day karmically. I'm like really excited to find out what happens that day.
Yeah,
I think I'm
gonna keep track of April 30th now.
Yeah. Something amazing is gonna happen. I'm like hoping like student loan forgiveness for me personally, but like,
yeah, I'll take some of that.
Or is it something else we've been talking about? Is the aliens? Maybe we'll finally get to talk to the aliens.
Sure.
They'll land on the White House and like give a press conference
and finally say, okay, you people, we've had it with what you're doing. We're coming in to save the day.
Exactly.
That's great.
Oh, so Carly, do you feel that there's more books in you? Are you working on anything right now, or how's all that shaping up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much revised to death a new young YA fantasy, which does deal with astrology and all that occult stuff that I'm into. And so right now I'm in the process of getting a new agent. So I'm sending that query letter and that manuscript out to different agents now. And hopefully I'll get a new agent soon. And my publisher is awaiting it. So they're looking forward to reading it. So they will go to them first. And then, yeah, we'll see what happens next. And I have a couple other things that I'm also working on too.
I love it. Your creative juices are just bubbling over. You've got your podcast that you're going to be working on, new books that are coming up. I mean, you'll definitely have to keep us posted on everything that's going on so we can tune in and help get the word out.
Yes. Oh, definitely. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity through your podcast or our podcast or your book to put one message out there to young teens around, well, I won't tell you around whatever you want it to be, what message would you send to young people?
I think listening to your intuition and getting your intuition to really paying attention to your intuition and developing your intuition, I think is the most important thing, because so many things in society, whether it's your parents or your teachers or your bosses, will tell you to ignore your intuition. And that's their self-serving interests are telling you to do that. But when you listen to your intuition, you gain empathy for other people because you can't help but feel for them. And also you then understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And you will be less likely to be led astray by those who don't have your best interest in mind. So I think that's the most important thing. Listen to your intuition and gain empathy for other people, and also do what's best for you, not necessarily what other people want you to do for them.
Not what your mom wants you to do.
Not what your mom wants you to do. Your mom has her own agenda, which is, that's her thing, and bless her. But the most important thing is you and yourself and what's right for you. And
when my kids were little, my goal for them was for them to be happy. I've talked to Raquel about this before, but as the years have gone on, I've revised that vision, and I just want them to be authentic wherever they are. That's my goal. And it is really hard sometimes not to meddle.
Yeah.
Not to be like, doesn't always do her homework. And I'm like, I should check it. And then I'm like, it's not my thing. It's her thing. Yeah,
I'm a college professor, and I will say there's some students who school is maybe not your thing. I love school. I loved it. I was a straight A student. It was my favorite thing. But some students are not into it, but they're forced to go to school because their parents want them to, and they think that's what's best. And it breaks my heart to think of these kids who are going into debt, $40,000 in debt, doing something they don't really want to do. That doesn't make them happy.
No sense whatsoever.
And gosh, it's just so much money, and it's so much time too. So if your parents are telling you to school, you don't want to go to school and you don't like it, get a part-time job somewhere. Don't waste that time and money. Life's short. Do what you love doing.
Good point. Jennifer and I both have, Jennifer more so than me, but Jennifer and I both have talked about writing a book at some point. And so I would love to know from you, what's the biggest or most heartfelt result or outcome from this whole process for you? Something that you thought was going to happen, or something just completely unexpected that you've received from the whole journey of now being a published author?
I think it's getting emails and just hearing from people, even who don't email me, who just post on social media, that they loved it and that they connected with it. And that is huge, because there will be, people who don't like it, and so that's hard. But the people who shout about it and who don't know me and who shout about it publicly because they love it so much, that is everything. That makes me feel so good. It's like, I put 8 years of my life into this, and so that it connected with people, that's huge.
Yeah. I loved it. I think I have friends who could have used this book when they were adolescents and had to kind of forge a path of their own. And it would have been so helpful to hear a voice that had some similar characteristics to their own. It would have been so helpful.
I hope I hope people, it's helpful for people. I think I always had a feeling it would be, but it really is heartening when it does.
Yeah,
connect.
Agreed. Great writing.
I think you're touching a lot of people with this. So thank you for putting this work out there, and
thank you
yourself and your creativity and imagination into it.
Thank you. That means so much to me.
And everyone should read it, and then have their kids read it.
Yes, do. The Reckless Kind by Carly Heath. It's a good read.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to say this really quick before we go. You mentioned at the beginning that you were originally a film student, but you decided you didn't want to go that route. Yeah. I will say, when I was reading the book, a lot of it was very visual for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was literally picturing scenes in my head. So your film background, whether that's what you wanted to stick with or not, it thoroughly informed the way that you wrote.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
There's a lot of visualization that happened when I was reading it. So
yeah, I agree.
Not gonna lie, like, I do have the dream, like, what if Netflix decided to make it a series?
Yeah.
or what if it got made into a movie? Like, that would be a dream. I have absolutely no desire to direct it or do any of like being on set thing, but I will. But if, the idea of it being picked up to be a movie would be my absolute dream come true.
Okay, we're putting it out in the universe.
We're visioning it.
Yeah, manifest the Reckless Kind Netflix series. Yeah,
it's out there. We're doing it.
That's so awesome. Thank you for being on. What a great conversation.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been so fun getting a chance to talk to you guys. And and you can follow me on Twitter at Carly L. Heath and on Instagram at Carly Lynn Heath, at my website, carlyheathauthor.com.
Yes, we will put all of your contact info and a link to the book, or to where they can buy the book, in the show notes, so people can stay in touch with you and get their copy of the book and read it and enjoy everything that you will be putting out in the future.
Thank you. And definitely everyone to support your local independent bookstore. So you can definitely order it. If it's not already carried by your independent bookstore, it probably is, but if it's not, you can always order it through them and support local businesses. Absolutely. Very good point to end on, Carly. Thank you so much. This was so much fun to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you.
I really loved the book. So
I did too.
I haven't read anything like that in years and years. And that's one of the things I love about the podcast and you booking such great guests. You've had me reading things. I really loved discussing it with my children.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really loved it because I do see it. They have the town halls for the school, and parents are coming in and they're talking about pronouns and they're talking about bathrooms. And some of them are enraged and some of them are trying to be advocates for their children.
Right.
And there's so much controversy around it, which to me is like, why?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But the book itself is like a positive way to bring that conversation forward. I think it's a really important piece of work, actually. And
I agree.
I'm hoping my daughter will read it. I talked about it enough. So, and it's available for her to read, but I think it's a really important piece of work. I think the representation needs to be there. And what I said about my friends who struggled as children who are now adults, I think this could have been just so helpful for them.
Right. Right. And I think I don't want any adults to be put off by the YA label, because yes, it is a book that it's under that young adult umbrella for sure. It centers around young adults. It's going to be pertinent for young adults. Absolutely. But this is not a dumbed down book. Like adults should read this because it's a really good book. It's really well written. It's a great story.
I liked it.
Characters. Yeah, I liked it too.
Yeah.
And if there's an adult parent who has a child who is struggling through any of this could give them maybe some words or some tools to understand or have those discussions with their child. So I think this book definitely needs to go beyond the young adult demographic for sure.
I should take it to the school board meeting and pass it out to those parents.
Yes, you should. You absolutely should.
Yeah.
Please do.
We can end on that. I'm going to take it to the board meeting. Bye, nice. Raquel. Great discussion.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.